When you have some virtual drums in your session, whether it be the Logic drummer or a session drummer from Native Instruments or whichever virtual drummer you use, do you ever feel like it's working great with the arrangement, but for some reason sonically, it's not cutting through in the mix and it's not present? Well, today I'm going to be showing you how to fix that and take your drums from sounding like this into this. So the first thing you need to be doing, no matter what virtual instrument you're using, no matter which drummer you're using, you have to bounce out the elements of the drums separately. So in each virtual drummer instrument, there is some way to do this, and I can go into that in a different video, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that you already have the separate elements, and this doesn't have to be every single element. You don't need room mics, or I mean, it's nicer to have room mics and everything like that, but the key elements that you need separate is kick, snare, hi-hats, and cymbals. And with those separate, you'll be able to do a lot to make sure the drums are sitting well with your track. Okay, now I'm just going to walk you through what I did to get these drums sounding the way they are sounding now. Hey, real quick, if you're looking to upgrade your home studio or you want to start a home studio and you need some good gear recommendations, I got you. I want to give you my free home studio gear guide with options for every budget and links to every product, so no matter where you fall in, you're going to benefit from this. Go download it, free, down below, and let's get back to it. So the first thing we need to do once we have the separate elements is to make sure the volume of each element is where it's supposed to be. So when I originally got these separate bounces, they were all at static. And I'm just going to solo the kick, snare, and hi-hat for right now. And this is where they were. The first thing I noticed is that the hi-hat was way too much panned to one side, so I went ahead and I compensated for that. The next thing I did was made the hi-hat a lot quieter and made the snare a little bit louder. I felt like the hi-hat was taking up way too much space and way too present, and the snare could have been a little bit more present, so I compensated for that. And this is already sounding loads better than when I got it originally. The next thing I did was took a listen to the rest of the instruments and the track and decided if this kick and snare is actually the right tone and actually cutting through for the correct way. And I realized that the kick was not holding the way it should have been in the mix, and I felt like the snare was a little bit too much of a slap in your face. So what I did was I triggered the kick and the snare with Steven Slate's trigger plugin. Now, it's nice to have this plugin, and it does a really great job, and it saves you a lot of time. But if you don't have this plugin, it's okay. You can still accomplish this result by taking kick samples and snare samples and layering it on top of each other and blending it in nicely, and that's like considered a manual trigger. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be using the trigger plugin. Okay, so for the kick, I'm using CLA's Rock Kick 1. I didn't really do much to it, but what I did was I triggered it 100%. So this is what it sounds like before the trigger. And this is what it sounds like after the trigger. And as you can see, the mix is to 100%. So basically, the new sample is entirely replacing the old sample. Now for the snare. For this one, I'm using CLA Rock Snare 3. I didn't really do much to it, but the mix is only about 45%. So I'm still letting a nice amount of the original snare come through, but this is just a snare on top of it, blended in to give it a little bit more character. So this is what the snare sounds like before. And this is what it sounds like after. Just a little bit more body and a little bit more character. And it does go a long way, especially in the mix. So that's as far as the sampling goes. And now at this point, the drum kit sounds a little bit something like this. The next thing I did was put EQ on the kick, and I basically added a little bit of low end, a little bit of low mids. I didn't touch anything to the higher mids, and the highs I gave a little bit of a boost. And then I also used the compressor here to compress very minimally, and this is what it sounds like before, after. Then I took another EQ, this time a Fab Filter EQ. I boosted a little bit, even more lows. I took out a lot around 270 and put up a little bit, a little high shelf, about 5K. And this is what it sounds like before, after. Just makes it and it just makes it a lot tighter. That's for the kick. Now for the snare, I took out a little top end, nothing crazy, and I put on Transient Master to enhance the attack and release of the snare, so I get more of an attack and I get more of a sustain. And this is what it sounds like before those two plugins. After. Now for the hi-hat, I put on CLA drums with the Start Me Up preset, and I added an EQ and rolled off everything in the low end because I just didn't need it, and I took out a little bit on the high end with a dynamic curve. So for toms, there's really only one tom hit in this entire song, but I put in a dynamic EQ to scoop out some lows, and then I took in an SSL channel. I used the plugin of Floor Tom, and then I disengaged the gate that they had going on over there. For some reason, the fills came in a separate track from this producer, so I just added in a little bit of Transient Master with a little bit of sustain, a little bit of attack, and it made it a little smoother. Then for the cymbals, I just put them in their respective places volume-wise. I didn't do any processing. The last thing I wanted to do was just give the drums a little bit of reverb so it sounds like the drums are breathing a little bit. So I put a longer reverb on the snare. And now my drums are completely processed, ready to go, and they sound great with the track. This is what it sounds like at the end result. And with the rest of the track, it sounds like this. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. I really hope I helped you out in some way. Let me know down below in the comments if I did, if you liked any specific tips on this video or what you related to most, or if you have any more tips to make your virtual drums sound better in the mix. Let me know down below. I really want to hear from you. So that's all for now. Until next time.